From I was a young man, about 3 years old, trumpet used to disturb me. Meaning the trumpet used to drive me crazy. So I've been wanting to get to the trumpet for as soon as possible. I think I finally got to it about age 11. That's after my forays as a young revolutionary.
Dizzy Reece was always someone that remained sort of a mystery to me. I did a lot of studying of Booker Little and Freddie Hubbard and Miles Davis and Lee Morgan and Kenny Dorham and Dizzy Gillespie, but I didn't really check out a lot of Dizzy Reece until maybe around the time when I first moved to New York in the late 90s. And, I heard some things and I was like, wow. And I always wondered how come he wasn't more widely talked about in the same breath as the aforementioned trumpet players. Are there any recordings that stick out to you that you really like his playing on?
Well, for me, it was the record with the Slide Hampton. What was that called?
A Day in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen, yep.
Yeah.
That's for me. That's the one. That's I heard that and I said, "Damn, who is this guy?" I didn't even know who he was and I heard it. It's like, whoa, slick. That's a bad dude, man.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this for many years. Like, how come, he's not known like that? Maybe it's, his own doing, but I don't know the story to it. Because he's straight out, out at the lineage with Donald Byrd and Lonnie Hilliard, all those cats, Blue Mitchell, and it's like, why not him?
Right.
I don't know if there's some kind of media thing. If he's wasn't marketable or whatever the terms that and the way they go about promoting people. I don't know. It's definitely not his playing.
Right.
That cat was super good.
What
about his playing was, for me, first is his sound. I was listening to him and I said, damn, it sounded like him and Booker Little had the same horn, the same mouthpiece, and the same setup. The whole thing is just clear and big, and it's just there. Second is his choice of notes was different, and just I try to hear that way too, but so I guess maybe that was part of the appeal. But his phrasing, the way he was, his note choices was different, and that's, I think, is the biggest thing, is his individuality altogether.
Right.
He definitely, and I don't think he was keen or even thought about imitating anyone, sounding like anyone. He definitely, after the Clifford Brown, came through and everybody trickled down after Clifford stuff, like I said earlier, Donald Byrd, Johnny Coles, that whole line of trumpet players. He had his own thing, man. I mean, I don't hear Clifford Brown. I mean, I'm sure it's an influence, but he's found a way to play himself.
Right.
Totally play himself and not imitate anyone. It doesn't sound like to me.
And Caribbean, as well as the British Commonwealth, was quite influenced by jazz. I used to hear a lot. In Jamaica, there was no television, so forth. Everything was jazz. All the families, everybody had jazz, the best of jazz. I used to listen to the American airwaves, and were quite influenced by American culture, period. So, of course, Louis Armstrong was the first. Then I got into the count basis swing style with Buck Clayton. Really my first lyrical, I think he started a modern trend, really, Buck Clayton. Yeah, I've always considered myself a lyrical player, regardless of how heavy I get into it, heavy bop whatsoever. It's still always that melodic streak is still there.
The Buck Clayton influence.
Of course, most of the great musicians, not that I'm great, but most of the great musicians, that's the thing, the lyricism and the beat, the swing.
Well, one other thing that struck me, of course, is your tone, which is huge, very clear, bright. And, I mean, a lot of musicians in your generation in the so-called bebop era kind of sacrificed that sound for dexterity and execution. But you seem to pay a lot of attention to the actual tone you're getting.
Well, the sound is the character. That's the person. And I try to be as transparent as possible in everything I do, regardless what it is. So I think it comes through in the trumpet, the transparency. Of course, I got a big sound, small sound, whatever. The purity of the sound is what qualifies. And the sound is supposed to carry a beat, not just playing, but it's...
There's a big thad thing for me, like just in terms of the way he's kind of his eighth note feel, and he's got like these dynamics within his lines and stuff. There's like an early one that was recorded in London with Phil Seaman on drums and Coleridge Good and another Jamaican guy, and Terry Shannon on piano again. And yeah, it kind of struck me when I listened to that. It was like, oh yeah, he's got the dynamic thing within the lines and something to do with the eighth note feel. And then on that blues in Trinity, you can really kind of hear it more. You know, he's got some of the kind of language. But it's weird because you can hear how he's kind of constructed his style, how Dizzy constructed his style, but he's not really taking the licks. He's kind of taken like the vibe of like Donald Byrd and the way he uses his vibrato and stuff like that, or these little, you know, the approach, let's say the general approach. But he's kind of using his own language and using motivic playing and stuff like that, motivic development and stuff, rather than, you know, taking the language and the licks. He's kind of taking the approach, and so he's kind of got his own style. And what a sound! Like his sound is unbelievable. Like such a big sound.
When I was in undergrad, I just kind of looked up on a record of his, Blues and Trinity. And I remember putting that on because at that time I was learning how, like really discovering how to play ballads. And I remember Neil Creaky, who was at Oberlin at the time, he did a master class on playing ballads, and how all three times, like halftime, double time, quadruple time, are all inside of the ballad time. And he was explaining those subdivisions. And then I just randomly looked up on this Dizzy Reece record where he was doing it. Like literally each portion of the band was playing at a different time. And I just kind of fell in love with his approach to playing on that because he demonstrated that during his solo.
Man, that's great. And what to you, I mean, so after your introduction to Dizzy, what is it that would you say is attractive about his playing? did you discover after you started checking them out?
Yeah, I love the way he fit the time that he plays in, his feeling and his ability to go into different subdivisions. I love how like there's a track where he was playing on that record with Donald Byrd, and he didn't try to out Donald Byrd. Donald Byrd. I thought that was good. Also, another one of those records that I love that he's on, man, is the one with Dexter Gordon, Slide Hampton's on that. What is that? A Day in Copenhagen. I love that. I love that record too. I love his kind of, I don't know if you would call it sort of an angular approach. Like he likes to step out there a little bit, but it's still inside. And but I'll definitely say that the thing that I enjoy about Dizzy the most is his broader kind of a sound. Like he has a really fat sound that I like.
I wonder if you could maybe tell me when the first time you became aware of Dizzy Reece?
Circa 1993, 94. My trumpet teacher gave me a cassette tape recorded from vinyl. I believe it was either Blues in Trinity or that album where he plays Ghost of a Chance. I can't recall the name of it, but maybe one was on one side of the cassette and the other. But yeah, he was very much an advocate of introducing us to not your everyday, like, yeah, you can go find Lee Morgan records, you can go find Miles Davis records, but you need to listen to some cats that have just a take that you're not going to hear every day, that are also bad cats but are unsung in a way. So
And what was your impressions when you first heard that? I mean, so 93, you were pretty young.
I was 11, right? It was probably 94 because I was probably like 12, 13. But yeah, I was still young, and everything was new to me. So, I was a big, Clifford Brown fan, Donald Byrd fan. At the same time, it's like there's other people in the world, So trying to expand the horizons. I was, blown away because they're the records that were, very easy to find back in those days. And, my dad gave me some Clifford Brown for my birthday, etc. But it was nice to, to hear some different kind of compositions, just a different take on the music, showing that it's vast and wide, and hearing a guy improvise that's, also technically like, facile, and he has a great sound, and he's doing all these things. It's that you've come accustomed to, but he's got a slightly different approach. It's not. I'm not saying it's like that different, but it's just a different kind of like niche or like area of like, it's like, oh, he did that differently than Clifford would have done it, or Fred. But it's interesting his age, like that bracket. It's
What about that bracket?
30, 31. Like I was so used to hearing I was Lee Morgan, Freddie Hubbard all day, and those guys are closer to, I guess, like 1940. They're like all 38, So I don't know. I was looking at his age yesterday, and I was like kind of amazed because I was going back and listening to Passing Ships again, and like, wow, he's dealing like in a lovely way. Aside of a much younger trumpet player, much younger, the Woody Shaw, it's fascinating to hear the two of them playing together, playing their unisons. I think they alternate each track soloing, but he sounds very much of the time, just as much as Woody does on that recording, in my opinion.
Well, yes. Well, I was quite aware of politics from I was young, and I used to attend all the rallies and so forth. I think I had a revolutionary streak somehow, and an evolutionary streak. I think it both goes together: politics, lifestyle, community. That's the metrics for my music.
Yourself being British, did you feel any kind of sense of pride with having someone of that stature once you learned who he was, being somebody that pretty much reared in a certain sense in the UK?
Well, to be honest, I mean, my pride came from more the fact that he was Jamaican, and my heritage also being Jamaican. So that was the pride that made me feel proud. Oh, this is a Jamaican guy. It's like, but the British side, him being Jamaican, but then I remember reading in the line notes he was in England, but I didn't know anything about that connection, or other than he said in the line notes that he was on the British scene, but I never heard anyone talk about Dizzy Reece. So that was, that was kind of like, it's like, why? How comes I don't know about this guy? Later on, finding out how impactful he was on that British London scene in the 50s, I was like, why don't we know about Dizzy Reece? Like, it's crazy. It's like, speaking to him and seeing and learning and doing the research and finding out just the big impact he had on that whole scene, and he's not revered as he ought to be. So,
all right. How about playing? Do you still practice regularly, or?
Yeah, I used to practice. 16, 14 hours a day for years.
Right.
But life is one big practice. Playing on the bandstand is practicing. It's all practicing. But of course, music is part of my life. So I'm actually playing in a couple of months, but I'm right on top of it. My chops are always there.
One of the things that astonished me, particularly when Dizzy and I were hanging out, was the fact that he's still 92 years old and he's still playing. Maybe not publicly, but I mean, this man sits at home on his iPhone and records himself all the time, coming up with new shapes and patterns that are all his own. And it was something that, definitely, if you're a trumpet player not humbled by it, then I don't know what to say. I certainly was humbled by it. The chops were in reasonably good condition for someone of that age. So he definitely was still practicing. And another thing is that when you listen, or when I listen to his records from the early 50s and into the mid and late 50s, and then listen to something like Passing Ships or beyond that record, is how his change, his playing evolved. I don't know why I'm shocked by it, but it's just something to learn from, sure.
With all those guys, we hear obvious variation and subtle variation. Like everybody who came up kind of went electric in the late 60s, early 70s, kind of maybe went a little more avant-garde. And those were much more, obvious turns of a phrase. But even if they weren't doing something like that, like changing the style of the music they were still refining everything they did. Spalding is my classic example of that. When I first, started playing with Spalding, doing Night of the Cookers material, it was like, oh, that's him. But wait, it's better, It's just a little more refined, a little more studied. Like, I don't know of anybody who stopped trying to perfect their craft, whether people were paying attention or not. One example is George Braith. George Braith is still in his basement in Staten Island, laying down tracks and, writing tunes and stuff like that. He's still doing it. We don't know about it. And I think Dizzy's an example of that. All those cats always were working on their craft and trying to refine their craft. And then they come out and you're like, oh, damn.
First of all, the summer of 1983, no, excuse me, summer of 1988. I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with him in Berlin. Me, Dizzy, and Charles Tolliver were trumpet section in a Broadway show that was adapted to an opera called Porgy and Bess. Um, and anyway, me, Dizzy, and Charles Tolliver were the trumpets, and Joe Gordon was a sub, came in for me afterwards because I had to go with Steve Coleman. So anyway, during that time, that's when I spent a lot of time with Dizzy. That summer of '88, and we got to be really, really good friends. And the thing, what I love about Dizzy's playing, well, to get right to the chase, man, his intervallic knowledge, his intervallic knowledge was very, very, very interesting. Great composer. And you did something a while back. You guys were talking about Dizzy Reece, and something about Dizzy reminds me of KD, Kenny Dorn, you know, and um, he was a kind of he's very eccentric cat, you know. He's very different, and that comes out in his playing. His intervallic playing was very, very interesting. And there's a Bandcamp um, link that is it's not a commercial thing. It's a Bandcamp link uh, that Dizzy Reece is on his Bandcamp. What do you call that? A Bandcamp format.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 3-part thing. It's some live stuff that was never released with him, Al Dreers, Albert Daly, and Calvin Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's live stuff. I forget where it is, but it's in New York. But that's probably one of my favorite things that he's ever done. So if you go on Dizzy Reece Bandcamp, you'll be able to find it. It's called Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to check that out. And of course, Dizzy Reece did a lot of Blue Note stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not a lot. We'll say maybe about 4 records for Blue Note. Stanley Turrentine's on one of them. Um, and also one of my favorite things he did was called Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
With I think it's Clifford Jordan, the bass player Art Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Is really great record. Anyway, that. And also, I was fortunate enough to spend after our summer together. Him and Clifford Jordan formed a big band that they used to play at Condon's every Monday in the late '80s. So I used to go down there without fail every Monday to hear that band. It was called the Dizzy Reece Clifford Jordan Big Band.
Mm-hmm.
I was there every Monday. So just checking out. Sometimes I would listen. Sometimes I would sit in. I remember Junior Cook being there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lot of Dizzy's writing and Clifford Jordan's writing. And at that time, I think that was like '89. Anyway, it was after the summer that me and Dizzy worked.
I hear the name Dizzy Reece, Maestro Dizzy Reece. Many characteristics and many attributes come to my mind. Clarity, fluidity, clarity in sound, clarity in ideas, vocabulary, language, flexibility, fluidity, singability, melodicism. I was hip and fortunate enough to be introduced and hipped to Dizzy Reece, kind of younger on my journey. Fortunate that the Chicago cats hit me to, what was really what. And Dizzy Reece was one of the, really one of the first musicians that I transcribed, along with players like Donald Byrd and Art Farmer. But the way that Dizzy Reece highlighted changes, the way that he sang through his instrument, the fluidity in his ideas, his individuality in everything that he played, the intent in what he played really resonated with me in my young ears. And I was able to sit and listen to his ideas, and I can slowly pick them together and transcribe what he was saying and what he was portraying through his instrument. So Dizzy Reece will forever have a soft spot in my heart. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for your contribution to this music. We all love you.
So how do you summarize the career of someone who's been great for well over 70 years? Honestly, for me, I'd say I won't summarize it because he's still here, still very lucid, and he's still got the ideas flowing. So instead, I'll just say, God bless you. And I'm very honored to be able to take part in paying tribute, which has long been overdue, to one Mr. Dizzy Reece. Thank you.